Hello everybody, my name is Paul Gilbert, and today with my Ibanez guitar and your Ibanez guitar, I'd like to show you all the things that I wish someone had shown me when I first started playing the guitar. So I'm going to show you what the knobs do, I'm going to show you what the switches do, where to put your fingers, all the good stuff that you need to start playing today and rock and roll. So stick around and we're going to have a good time and make a lot of noise. And thank you very much. Keep watching. All right. Well, I remember when I got my first electric guitar and I didn't know what any of these things did. So I want to explain them to you so you can rock. The first thing, I guess, is plugging the guitar in. There's a hole here which is called the jack or the input jack. And this is the cord. And if you unplug it with your amp on, it's going to make some noise. But it's safe, it won't, unless you're standing in your bathtub, you're perfectly safe. And you just put it in the jack, it's going to make a little bit more noise. But now you're in. Now to hear the guitar, it's got a volume knob, which you're going to have to turn up. Now the cool thing about the volume is I've got my amp set with the gain all the way up. Gain is like distortion or fuzz or overdrive. There's a lot of same names, they kind of mean the same thing. And if you have that up on the amp, then your volume is not only going to control the overall loudness or volume, but it's also going to get fuzzier or more distorted as you turn it up. And if you turn it down, it gets nice and clean. So with one knob, you get a whole variation of tone. That, of course, brings us to the tone knob, which actually cuts treble. So you can hear, like, this is a very trebly sound. But if you turn the tone knob down, it's much more mellow. And actually, if you crank up your volume, it's still a pretty good rock sound. And you can hear the difference if I turn it up. So with two knobs there, you can get a lot of variation. Now we come to the switch. It's a 5-way switch, and what it does, it controls the pickups. These are called pickups, there's 3 of them, because they pick up the sound of the string and, of course, send it to your amp. This one is a humbucking pickup, so there's actually 2 coils. These are single coils, so you can see there's, kind of one of these oblong thingies, and this one's got 2 of them. The reason it's called a humbucker is because it bucks the hum or gets rid of the hum. So it's really quiet. You can turn it up even with a lot of gain and there's not much noise. When you go to the single coil, there's going to be some more noise, especially if you have a lot of gain on the amp. But don't worry about it. Nothing's broken. I don't worry about it because when you're playing, you don't hear it and it actually has a great tone that way. So that's the difference between the pickups. And this just decides which pickups you're going to hear. If you have it all the way back, it sort of corresponds to the pickup that's all the way back. This has a more trebly sound because it's more towards the kind of trebly part of the bridge. So this is the most trebly pickup. If you put it all the way the other way, you get this pickup. It's a little more bassy, a little more mellow. A little more trebly here. The middle pickup, of course, is the middle position, right there. It's subtle differences in tone, but the more you play, the more you'll get familiar with how they feel and how they sound. The 2 other positions are sort of, how would you describe them? I guess you'd call them like the number 4 and the number 2 position. If you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it would be 4 and 2. And if you put it in this one here, sort of an in-between position, it splits the humbucker. So the humbucker becomes a single coil, and you get this coil and this coil wired together, which is a really nice sound for like blues. And then a similar idea where if you have it here in this in-between position, you get these 2 together. And that's going to be still kind of bluesy, but a little more mellow. So with just one switch and two knobs, you get a ton of different sounds. I use these all the time. You know, it becomes second nature. Your hand just reaches down there and gets the sound you want without you even thinking about it the more you play. Next, as we move up the guitar, this of course is the neck. And you put your hands on the neck, you can strangle the guitar to make it play. And this is where your left hand goes, moves all around, makes all the things happen. The lines on here, the metal lines, the metal little bars are called frets. And you just, you know, when you're playing, you sort of count them off. Like this would be the first fret, second fret, third fret, and on up. This guitar, I think, if I'm counting right, has 22 frets. So there's the very last one. That's the highest note you can get without bending. And the lowest note, of course, is there. Then over here we've got the nut. And don't laugh, that's what it's called. And the strings go over it, and it's just like a fret, but you know, it's sort of the last one. And instead of being metal, I think that one's graphite, which is really good for keeping the guitar in tune. Okay, before I forget, this is the bridge, which is where the strings come out. The strings actually feed through the back of the guitar, and then they come out through the bridge. That's of course where you pick and where you strum. And the last thing is our tuning keys. And these are really important because if you're not in tune, nothing's going to sound very good. So I think we're going to go to the next section, which is about tuning, and then we'll get ready to play some music. So see you soon, and we'll tune. All right, it's time to tune. These are your tuning keys. And first, maybe just experiment with one and turn it a little bit in both directions so you can see how it makes the note higher and lower. Yeah, so that's basically how it works. They all work that way. And there's also an electronic tuner in your Jumpstart kit. It's got a manual, and that's a really easy way of tuning. But I'm also going to play the sound of each string for you right now, and I'm going to tell you what the string is called as well. So, you know, if you want to just listen and tune up that way, it's a good way of doing it too. It's always good to work on your ear, because you're a musician after all now. So the first string I'm going to play is the first string. It's the lowest to the ground, it's the skinniest, and it's also the note E. And, you know, for now, you can play it any way you want. You can hit it with your finger, or you can, of course, use the pick. And it should sound around that pitch. The next string is the second string. I bet you guessed that. It's a B note, and it sounds like this. I'll give you a little time so you can move your tuning peg back and forth. Try to get it to match that note. Okay, now we're going to move on to the G string. Also the third string, but the note is G. I'll give you a little time. Na, 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 na. The next one is the fourth string, which is also the note D. This is also the first string that is wrapped, so it's a little bit thicker. You can look down and there's little wraps on it. The next one is the A string, or the fifth string. And the very last one is your thickest, manliest string, and it's the sixth string. It's also an E. So actually your first string and your sixth string are both E strings. So that's why the numbers are good. So you know this one is the first, and this one is the sixth. Okay, here we go. We're almost ready to play. I just want to tell you about a couple more things that are in your Jumpstart pack. You've of course got a guitar strap, which you can put on if you want to stand up and you know, look like a cool electric guitar player. For now, I'm going to keep sitting down because I want you to make sure you can see my fingers really well, so I can show you how to play. Another thing, of course, is the guitar pick. And most guitar players, including me, use a pick. It's for strumming and picking and doing all the stuff you do with your right hand, if you're right-handed. And to hold the pick, there's a couple different ways you can do it, but I want to show you kind of the most common way to start off with. Most people just use their first finger and their thumb. And you put the pick there, close your thumb down, and you're holding it. From there, most of the motion actually comes from the wrist. Or sometimes you can move your fingers and thumb a little bit like that. But, you know, from there you can put your hand down by the bridge. You can actually even rest it on the bridge, which is a really good spot to have it. It gives you a lot of control. And from there, let's try playing something. Actually, let's just try cranking it up and playing everything. It's going to be noisy, but who cares? So just hit the strings with a pick. Yeah. Cool. So, you know, there's a bunch of messy notes everywhere. We'll clean them up later, but at least you got a good feel of whacking the strings. I'm going to try to start out with something super easy so you can get it right away. I'm just going to use my first finger. This is the first finger, by the way. And I'm going to put it on the first string, which is this string. And I'm going to put it on the 3rd fret. So if you count up, this would be the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fret. So again, I'm using the pick to make the note sound out. I'm pressing down to make sure it's a clear note. And your finger can be anywhere within that space. Although a lot of times you can actually have it closer to the fret. Might make it a little easier to push it down. So the next thing I'm going to do is make a rhythm, because music's got to have rhythm. So I'm going to do something kind of easy. And this one's going to be, I'm just going to play it for you. You can hear it by ear. And it should sound something like this. So what I did is I moved it up from the 3rd fret, played it 4 times, then I moved it up to the 5th fret. There's a dot there too, which is good. Lets you know where you are. And played it 4 times again. And then I took my finger off completely, and there you have what's called an open string, where you don't even need your hand. It's just the open string where the nut makes the note. And I'm going to play this note, which is actually a G note, 4 times, and then the A note up 2 frets 4 times, and then the open string 8 times. Now that's real confusing. It's much easier to just listen to it. So it sounds like this. Now, of course, you're just starting out, so don't worry about playing it that fast. You can slow it down if you want. The next thing I want to show you is very similar to the last thing. It's going to be that same 3rd fret G note on the 1st string with your 1st finger, but I'm going to show you something called barring. And this is where you use the same finger, the 1st finger, but you hold down 2 strings this time, the first 2 strings. So you'll play the same note plus this note. And when you pick them, you can pick both notes kind of at the same time. And you can hear already that sounded more rock and roll, or heavy metal, or alternative, or whatever you want to call it. Back in my day, it was rock and roll. And so let's try that with the same rhythm. Then we'll move up 2 frets. Those are the notes separately, but we're going to play them together. Again, this is all just 1 finger. Starting to sound good. And then we're going to use 2 fingers now. I'm going to use my 3rd finger, which is this one, and I'm just going to hold that same 5th fret chord. It's a chord because it's got 2 notes. And then I'm going to lay down this 3rd finger on the 7th fret, which is a B note. And those are the 2 separate notes. But I'm of course going to play them together. So the whole thing is going to sound like this. There's 4 beats on the 1st chord, 4 beats on the 2nd chord, and 8 beats on the last one. Cool, so now it's starting to sound like rock. So one of the most important things about playing the guitar or any instrument is practice. So the things that I showed you, make sure you practice them a lot. The more you practice them, the easier they'll get for you. So the faster you can do them, the cooler you can do them, and the more you can do them without looking down at your fingers, and you can start like wearing the guitar low and being a rock and roller. So the next thing I want to show you is very similar. Again, I like to connect things so it makes it easy. This is kind of the same thing I just showed you, but it's going to be on the big, thick 6th string. And let's try that same lick. It's going to start on the 3rd fret. So again, 1, 2, 3, with your first finger. Play it 4 times. Then move up 2 frets. And then the open. So let's try that in rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Cool. So make sure you practice that over and over and over again. It's going to keep sounding better, and that's why practicing is fun, because the more you do it, the cooler it's going to sound. So the next thing I want to show you is one of the most useful chords and techniques in all of rock music, or whatever you want to call it. It's real similar to what I just showed you, except I'm going to add one note, and this again is going to use your 3rd finger. You can also use your 4th finger if you need to stretch. Really, either one is fine, but I'm going to start with the 3rd, so give that a try if you can. We're going to start on that same note, the G note on the 3rd fret. Then I'm going to take my 3rd finger, and I'm going to put it on the 5th string, which is the next one down, and I'm going to put it on the 5th fret. So I'm playing 2 different notes again. That's the notes separately, but I'm going to play them together. And you can hear already how that sounds thick and meaty and heavy and good, I like that. And then let's move it up 2 frets. And you can sort of lock your hand into that position of that chord. And then move it up the 2 frets. And for now, let's play this chord. Let's see. I like it here. Now to get this chord, I had to shift my hand down a set of strings. What I mean by that is I now have my first finger, this one, on the 5th string, this one, on the 7th fret. I'll give you a chance to get there. And then I put my 3rd finger on the 4th string. It's the first time we played the 4th string. There are the notes separately, and here they are together. So again, it's the same kind of chord shape, but it's just moved down a set of strings. The first time that you play chords like this, it might be a little bit tricky when you have to go from one chord to the other. So I want to show you some things that will help you with that change or that transition. The position of your left hand is really important because, of course, your fingers are attached to your hand, so your fingers can't go anywhere without your hand helping out. It's going to really help you out when you play these chords to have your hand come underneath the guitar a little bit. If your hand is up here, then your fingers can't reach to these thicker strings. They won't go there. You can pull on it, but it won't make it. So as you take your hand underneath the guitar it's going to reach up there. In fact, I've got big hands, so it'll go like way more than I need. But make sure that your hand is down below the neck, and that'll give you a lot more reach and let you hit any note you want to. So that's really important. For the transition, again, you can sort of lock your hand into that position and then just move the whole thing up. You don't have to like take each finger separately. You know, once you have that shape, keep it. And of course, to practice it, you can do the change back and forth. That's really good practice. And once you get that down, you can play so many cool rock songs. The last change is probably the most difficult, where we changed not only the position up 2 frets, but also we went down to that next set of strings. To get that down, you do have to lift your fingers off and then move it up. So, you know, practice that and make sure, again, that you've got your hand far enough below the neck where your fingers can reach easily. And don't worry if it's slow. I mean, you're just starting out, so there's no shame in doing it slow. As slow as you have to go to get it right. That's the key to practicing, is doing it slow and as perfect as you can do it, and then slowly speeding it up as it gets more comfortable. By the way, the kind of chords that I'm showing you here are called power chords, a very good name for a very good chord. And I want to show you one last thing that's really important. This is how to make the other strings that you're not playing quiet. Because obviously you only want to hear the strings that you are playing. There's 2 ways you can do that. The first way is with your left hand. For example, you're playing the notes, you know, with the tips of your fingers, but with this whole other part of your finger, you can touch the other strings lightly without pressing them down and make it so they're muted out and won't ring out. To show you an example of this, I can play just one note. This is on the 3rd fret. And with my left hand, again, I'm touching real lightly with that part of my finger, and I can actually play with the pick all the notes. I can strum all of them. But these are muted out with my left hand. So when you play the chord with 2 notes, make sure you have that just lightly resting on the strings. That way, you know, you can do big rock and roll motions with your right hand, and it still doesn't ring out. Just so you know, this is what it sounds like if you don't do it. You know, we lucked out there because some of the open strings are in the right key, but a lot of times it can get ugly. So, you know, be careful with that. You want to be able to control it. And last but not least is this part of your right hand is really good for muting the strings as well. This gives you a real heavy and controlled sound. So without it, it's going to be very open and sustained. But with it muted with this part of your hand, it sounds like this. So you can hear how heavy that sounds and how good it is for rock. So the first 2 years that I played guitar, I pretty much used those chords for everything, and it works for a lot of rock songs. But the thing that I really wish someone had shown me was the full chords that you can play with all the strings. Again, the open strings are strings where the nut is actually the fret, and you don't have to play anything. But sometimes if you just put a couple fingers on, you can get a beautiful chord. It sounds great for rock or for clean stuff or for lots of things. But they're easy to play and they really sound good. It also really helps. There's a chord chart that you'll find in your Jumpstart kit. And from early on, I always used one of these charts because it makes it really easy to memorize the shape of the chord. Again, the shape, the reason I say shape is when you put your fingers on the guitar, it makes a little shape. And to memorize those makes it so much easier to just hit it and play it without thinking. And you know, that's the way that I think about it, and I think a lot of guitar players do. So let's go to our first chord shape. This is the shape for an E minor chord. E minor is one of the best keys. Guitar is sort of meant to play in E minor. That's the way it's tuned up, and it makes it easy to play. This particular chord just requires 2 fingers. The fingers you want to use are your 2nd and 3rd finger. And you can sort of see how the chord diagram is like a picture of the guitar neck. You know, you can see how the lines correspond to the frets and the strings, and those dots are going to correspond to where your fingers go. So just try sticking your 2nd and 3rd finger in there. In fact, you'll see down below there's a number 2 and 3, and that's how you know which finger to put where. Up top is the picture of the nut, and you can see that everything is, there's no X's there or anything. If you see an X, that means you can't play it. But in this case, there's no X's, so we can play everything. So this chord is going to sound like this. I'm going to play the notes separately first. So that's all the notes. Again, you're fretting these 2 with your fingers. So make sure they're pressed down. And you're going to have to move your hand so you're not accidentally muting out the other strings. Again, make sure your hand is low below the neck so your fingers can reach up there. Now the cool thing about these kind of open chords is that you can strum the whole thing, and it gives a really big sound. There's really nothing bigger than a big open chord like this. There's a lot of different rhythms you can play, but for right now I'm just going to strum it so you can get the feel and hear the sound. So I want to show you a couple more of those open chords. These again are going to sound big, they sound great clean, they sound great overdriven, and a great way to memorize them again is the idea of making a shape out of it in your head. The first one I'm going to show you is an A major chord, and this is one of the easiest shapes because it's just sort of a straight line. You just use your first finger and you bar, which means you hold down more than one string at the same time. You bar across those 3 strings that you'll see on your chord diagram. Those 3 strings will sound like this. And you've also got the open A string, which is the 5th string. Again, if you're just starting out, you want to make sure that you've got your hand in a good position. Your thumb is going to be touching the back of the neck, and you want to press down good and solid to get those notes nice and clear. And of course, it sounds great when you play them all together. I had to turn up the volume for a second there to get some fuzz. The next one I want to show you is a D major chord. This one is shaped kind of like a triangle. So if you look at your chord chart, you can see that shape. And here are the notes that you're pressing down. And again, it's got the open D string, which is the 4th string. If you're looking at my hand, you can see how my fingers are kind of close together. So I'm going to try to do it separately with my 2nd finger, my 3rd finger, my 1st finger, and the open string. This is actually the first chord I ever learned in my whole life. I still use it. It's a great chord. I love it. We'll make it rock later, but you've got to learn the notes first, and remember that little triangle shape. You'll never forget it now. The next chord I want to show you is an E major, another really important one. This one, I'm going to show you the notes separately again. This is your 1st finger on the 1st fret of the G string. Then your 3rd finger fits in there. That might feel a little strange at first because you're skipping your 2nd one, but don't worry because your 2nd one goes right here on the 5th string, 2nd fret. So here's the 3 notes that you're fretting. And this one's cool because all the other strings are open. You have the low E is open, and the bottom 2, B and E, are open as well. So this one's really big sounding because you can play all strings at the same time. That sounds good. So the way to make these chords work, these open chords, is there's a couple different things you can do, but one of the best things is strumming. This is where you play, all the strings at the same time. There's my D chord, the triangle shape, and I played them all with a downstroke. But strumming sort of makes a rhythm out of it. The most simple strum would just be going down, with a beat, like. But when it really starts working and sounding cool is when you actually do upstrokes as well. These are all down towards the floor. Up is up towards the sky. And a strum is going to have both of those. It's sort of a motion where you're going up and down, you're alternating. Don't worry if you don't get it right away. It takes some practice, but it's worth it because it sounds cool. And it's fine to slow it down, make it as slow as you need to get it right. And then the more you do it, the more you'll get a natural motion with your right hand. And you can start making up your own accents and rhythms. In other words, if you want to make one strum louder than another one, it really makes it very musical. A lot of times the upstrokes, like you can go down, up, that sort of thing. And again, your right hand never really changes. It's basic motion. It's just, I'm accenting those ups. Yeah, it's time to work on playing guitar solos. And don't worry, we won't get to that crazy stuff right away, but we'll start with the really good scales that you need to get into solos on the electric guitar. So, to learn scales, it's really helpful to learn scale shapes. And in the same way where we learn chords, we learn the chord symbols, to learn scale shapes, it really helps to learn something called tablature. So in your Ibanez Jumpstart pack, you will have a booklet that will have some tablature in it. And right now on our screen, we're going to take a look at what tablature looks like. It's, again, in the same way where you have the chord diagrams, tablature is sort of a picture of the neck. You've got lines that represent the strings. You can count 6 of them up and down, so they sort of correspond to the strings. The highest line on the page is actually going to correspond to your high E string, the skinny one. The reason I call it high is because it's high in pitch, even though on the page it's high in height. All the way down to the lowest string on the page, which is your lowest string in pitch, the 6th string. Now you'll see some numbers on there when you see tablature. The numbers that are on the string lines are the frets. So, if you see the numbers 1, 2, 3, it's going to be the frets that correspond to that. The numbers that are written below are the numbers of the fingers that you use, because obviously you can use it, all sorts of different fingers for that same fret. So that'll give you an idea of how to read tablature. The thing it doesn't tell you is the rhythm, and for that you're going to have to use your ear. Of course, you can always learn to read regular sheet music, but a tablature is an easy way, especially if you can just hear the rhythm naturally, to get an idea of where it's played on the guitar. Great way of learning scales and guitar music. So the first scale that I want to show you today is the first scale that I ever learned. It's a major scale, And the reason I learned it first was because my third grade music teacher wrote out on the board one day the steps of the major scale. By steps, it's almost the same as frets, where a whole step is actually 2 frets. So if you're playing an open string, a whole step would be 2 frets up. There it is. That's a whole step. And next whole step would be there. Then a half step, a whole, a whole, a whole, and a half. Now I went through that kind of fast, but let me just play the whole scale for you. I'm doing this on 1 string, the 6th string, and I'm just, for now, I'm going to use 1 finger, my middle 2nd finger. Now the major scale sound is probably familiar to you. There's a lot of, that kind of song I'm sure you've heard. It's a very musical scale. And the reason I wanted to play it for you on 1 string is just to show you how the different steps work. How you can have a whole step, that just single half step, whole, and half. It's a good way to get the idea of what a scale sounds like. Of course, because you're playing a guitar, you've got more than 1 string. And you can play a scale much easier if you use more than 1 string. So I'm going to play the same notes that you just heard, but on a couple different strings. It's going to look and sound like this. So you can see and hear how that's the same notes as that, but I didn't have to move my hand, my left hand, nearly as much. You can just keep it in one place. And that allows you to play much faster because your arm's not moving all over the place. So that's sort of the concept of scales. The A minor pentatonic. It's a huge word, don't worry about it now. But that's what it's called. And if you refer to your book that came with your Ibanez Jumpstart package, there'll be a diagram in there of how to play the A minor pentatonic scale with the tablature. Let me play it for you right now, real slow. The scale is going to sound like this, starting on let's start on the lowest note, lowest in pitch, which is the A note on the 6th string. And I'm going to play through it just so you can hear the sound of the scale initially. That's all the way up and back all the way down. Now, I'm playing it kind of quick for a beginner. So again, don't worry about playing it fast. Just play it, as fast as you can play it and still play it perfect. So it's okay if it's slow. You can do the whole scale at that tempo. It's no problem. You can go even slower if you want. Just make sure you're getting those notes nice and clear. And make sure that you get, again, the idea of the shape on the fretboard. In this scale, it's real nice because your first finger is always in the same place. No matter what you play, your first finger is going to be on the 5th fret. The other fingers change around a little bit, but your first finger always goes back to the 5th fret. Makes a big line in the shape of the scale. Now, the reason this scale is so useful is because you can use all the things that are unique to the electric guitar to make it sound cool and make it come alive. If you're just playing a piano, you can play the notes and you can play them loud or soft, but you can't do things that you can do on an electric guitar, like bending or doing vibrato where you shake the string with your finger, or sliding around. And I'll explain those in more detail in a second, but I just want to show you how you can make that scale, that simple scale, come alive by bending the strings, doing vibrato, and sliding into and out of the notes. So every note that I'm playing there is in that A minor pentatonic scale. With a lot of practice, you can make it come alive with those techniques. Let me show you some of those techniques a little bit slower so you can get them and make them work for your own playing. The first thing I want to show you is a bend. And this initially is going to take, it's going to make some calluses on your finger. You know, it takes some strength, and the more you practice it, the stronger the skin on your fingers will get. So you can do it, you know, without going, ow. But initially it might be a little painful, but don't worry, you know. But you know, if it bleeds, stop. You know, wait for your skin to grow back. The thing that I do to make it easier is if I'm bending a note, for instance, I'm going to play a note on the G string, it's a third string, and I'm going to play it on the 7th fret with my third finger. Now my third finger alone isn't strong enough to bend the note very much. But if I put all three of my fingers on there, the first finger and the second finger and the third finger, then I've got more strength to bend that string down or up. Either way, it's going to make the string raise in pitch. Maybe initially, I would recommend bending it down towards the floor. It's a little bit easier technique-wise, and it's the first way that I did it when I was learning how to play guitar. Of course, you can do a straight bend, or you can bend it and shake it up and down to give it that vibrato. Also, the way I'm doing that is I'm using my wrist to actually move my hand. So my individual fingers aren't moving so much. They're actually staying still, and it's my wrist that's making my finger move. I'm taking this part of my first finger and putting it on the bottom of the neck like that to use as a pivot. Now, I know that's a lot of information at once, so let me just show you and you can watch. So initially I would say, take your hand and put it so it's actually touching the bottom of the neck like that. Then slide your fingers over so they're all on that string, third string. Your third finger will be on the 7th fret, and then you play the note, and you can almost grab your hand, and because your fingers are connected to your hand, when you move your wrist, it'll move the string. Now, some guitar players do use their fingers, you know, like that, and that'll still work. It's just a different kind of sound, but I really do recommend this one. You know, your whole hand is a lot of control, and you'll get great vibrato, and vibrato and bending is the key to having, you know, just soul and emotion out of the guitar. A piano can't do it, you know, but an electric guitar can. It's one of the coolest sounds you can make. So the next technique that I want to show you will also fit into your A minor pentatonic shape. This is a really, really useful technique. It's actually a combination of techniques. The first one is called a hammer-on. The second one is called a pull-off. And let me demonstrate how it goes. I'm going to use two fingers, my first finger and my third finger, and I'm going to put it on the G string, which is your third string. And we're going to start on the 5th fret. It's going to sound like that. And then your third finger will go on the 7th fret, a whole step up. So normally the way you get a string to sound is by picking it. But there's another way you can do it, and that is if you actually use your third finger to pull on the string. You know, it almost acts like a pick. You know, and that way you can get that note to sound without even using your right hand. You can also go back to the note by hammering on with that finger. It takes a little bit of strength and a little bit of practice, but it's not that bad, so you know, just give it a try and you'll get it. You don't have to do it fast right away. You can do it slow and make sure you get it right. And of course, this frees up your right hand, so you can do things like point at the audience and make rock and roll faces. So to get the most out of your guitar and out of the fretboard, another thing you can do is something called using octaves. An octave is basically the same note. If you play, for example, an A note, an octave is also an A note, but it's higher. Now, to explain that, the best way to do it is to listen to it. Here's, again, the low A. This would be the high A. And they sound real nice together. In fact, even the way the guitar is tuned, you've got a high E and a low E, and those sound good together. If you go up a little bit, you can hear how something that's not an octave is kind of ugly, but the octave is much nicer. So if you want to take the scale that I just showed you, the A minor pentatonic, the way the guitar neck is set up is whenever you go up or down 12 frets, it's an octave. So it's a lot of frets, but if you count all the way up from the 5th fret here, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then you're on the high octave of that A. You can hear how it's the same note, but only higher. And you can use that same shape that you learned before up there. So any lick that you learn down here, you can do up here, and it's going to sound great in the same song in the same key. So you can take any one lick that you learn and immediately you know 2 licks. So when you're playing a solo, it really helps to have a cool rhythm to go underneath it. So I want to show you a rhythm that's going to work with that A minor pentatonic scale that I just showed you. This is going to be a chord that will use your first finger. It's going to be on the D string, which is the 4th string. It'll sound like this. That's the single note. And to make it a chord, I'm going to use the open A string. So those 2 notes together sound like that. Now, to make a rhythm out of it, I'm going to actually use my 3rd finger and go up to the 4th fret on the D string. There are the notes separately. And I just go back and forth. So it's like... And then, of course, I've got to come up with a rhythm for it that feels good. So I'm going to do something like this, a little shuffly blues kind of thing. So the whole time your A string is just open. But the notes on the D string change each time. So you can see how your 1st and 3rd finger are making that note change. I'm also using the palm of my hand to mute it and make it tight and heavy. And I'm going to do that same idea, but on the next set of strings. By that, I mean the open D, and this time I'm going to fret the G string on the 2nd fret. And again, we'll go up that whole step with the 3rd finger to the 4th fret. Same lick, basically. You just have to shift down a set of strings. Let's go back to the version with A as the open note. 5th string, of course. and the last one goes to the lowest and biggest strings. I bet you can figure it out, but I'll show you just in case. Of course, the lowest, low E string, the 6th string, will be open, and then your finger will be on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and you'll go up to that 4th fret on the same string. So let me play that whole progression so you can hear how it sounds together. Be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Then switch. Switch back down. Down a low one. So all the soloing I was doing there was out of that A minor pentatonic scale. But of course I was using the techniques of bending and pulling off and hammering on, sliding to make it come alive and rock. Of course, once you get a hang of this, you can start doing a little quicker, you know. With a pick scratch at the end. That makes it fun. So I want to show you one part of the guitar. Sometimes it's called the whammy bar, sometimes it's called the tremolo bar, but it's a piece of metal like this, and there's a hole on the bridge, and all you have to do is push it in there, and you're all set to do some whammying. It's going to lower and raise the pitch of the strings. If you push on it, it'll lower it. And if you pull it back, it'll go up a little bit. You can use it for, of course, you can do finger vibrato, or you can also use the whammy bar to get vibrato that way. And you can do big dive bomb screams. But you know, be careful, because the crazier you go, it may be a little bit difficult to keep it in tune. But so far we're working good. A good way you can keep it in tune actually is, if it goes out a little bit, just tune it up and keep whammying, and eventually the whammy bar will actually bring it back in tune. So tune it up a little bit, whammy, tune, whammy, and eventually the whammy will fix everything. So that's my whammy lesson. Now, all the things I've showed you so far have been with standard guitar tuning. It's the way everybody tunes for most songs, the way I tune. But sometimes it's cool to try other tunings. I want to show you a really easy one that sounds big and heavy. This is where you tune your 6th string, which is your E string, down a whole step to the note D. You can use your electronic tuner to make sure it's a D, or you can use your ear. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit and then fine tune it in. Cool. Now this low D is now an octave from the 4th string, which has always been a D. So those notes are going to sound good together. And by coincidence, the A string in the middle sounds real good with both of those. So you can play just those 3 strings big, heavy sound. You can also use your triangle-shaped D chord together with that, and you have a big, huge, heavy chord. Now, when you've got stuff this heavy, again, it really helps to mute with your right hand to sort of control it and get it tight. It's also very easy to move up to other chords with this tuning. You can just use your first finger and bar across those 3 strings. Let's try it on the 3rd fret. So this would be those 3 bottom heavy sounding strings barred with your first finger on the 3rd fret. If you play them all together with some muting. Again, to make this happen, it's going to help if you take your hand and move it below the guitar to give you lots of reach, so you can make sure to hit those notes easily. Let's try taking it up to the 5th fret. And back down to the open. One of my favorite things to do is also use the 6th fret. Kind of a real heavy and dissonant sound, which sounds cool when you're doing this heavy stuff. Now, I'm just making this up as I go along, but these chords are really fun to play around with. And I'm doing everything with just my first finger. So you can get great heavy sounds with pretty easy technique and a cool tuning. I almost forgot, the most important thing I can tell you is to practice at least 50 or 75 or 100 hours every day. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but practice really is what makes it come together. And the way you can practice is by making it fun. You just play the stuff you like, play the stuff that sounds good, play it over and over and over, because the more you play it, the better it's going to sound. And it's exciting to hear yourself getting better like that. That's what worked for me. I hope it works for you. And just keep on jamming and playing and having a great time. So if you need more information about the techniques that you saw today, or if you want to go even further, make sure to check out the Ibanez website at ibanez.com. They've got lots of information. Also, you can check out my website, which has very little information but lots of crazy pictures, and that's paulgilbert.com. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the road. Rock and roll.